Hey everybody, it is nostalgia time once again, and we are gonna do another upgrade experiment. Upgrading through a series of beta builds of Windows. And so this time we're gonna be starting our journey from XP to Vista, which was one of the most complicated and more advanced development cycles of any version of Windows. So here we go. Right away it says you are about to install an evaluation version of Windows. Yes, we will. And yes, we'll accept the agreement and of course do the NTFS file partition. So here we go. The first build we are starting with here is Windows Longhorn build 3683. That was Vista's code name. And this build was compiled on September 23rd, 2002. And this is the earliest leaked build that we have. There were actually two other unconfirmed builds of this. One being build 3670, compiled on August 19th of 2002. And then there was 3663 that was compiled in July. So pretty much here, the install of this is going to be pretty much identical to a standard copy of XP. I mean, it says XP and everything. The boot screen, of course, remains unchanged. Still says XP Professional. It looks to be based on Service Pack 1. You can tell by the 2003 copyright date, although this was compiled in 2002. And of course, the second portion of the installation also remains identical. So now we're about to launch into the out-of-box experience, and we can see the copyright date on the bottom left has reverted back to 2001. Again, this is Service Pack 1, I believe. This is based on Service Pack 1. However, there is a bug in this build, according to BetaWiki, as I'm actually looking at the BetaWiki pages as I tour the builds, that this may take much longer to initialize than some other builds. And of course, we don't have any sound drivers, which is usual. But once again, everything still resembles XP. Now, of course, I know I will be using this machine. And then when we click finish, we get a different looking welcome screen. And I actually kind of like the design too. It's in like a, what is it, tealish gray. That's pretty neat. Now, if I pull the welcome screen back up here, on the top right corner, there's actually a clock. There's actually a clock on the top right corner, which is actually pretty neat. This is actually the first implementation of using the time on the lock screen, but that functionality would later be implemented into Windows 8 and would actually be utilized going forward in Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, and Windows 11. I like the new design too. It's pretty nice. And then here's the build string at the bottom that says Longhorn XP Professional, build 3683. So looking further at BetaWiki, in this build, it includes an early version of the Windows Presentation Foundation, which relies on the .NET components. It was based on the first variant of .NET Framework, and it can be installed on other versions. There is a new feature called Windows Trust Manager, which is similar to the user account control that we see now. And so, because we're doing an upgrade experiment, I would like to install a few games. So, let's start with one from my childhood that I did play on XP. Ooh, I like the buttons, but of course we're just going to get a whole bunch of beeps because there are no audio drivers on the system. I believe it's mainly when we run an application as an administrator that it would come up. And if we open up Explorer, we can see we have a new design. And I can also see that This is the first build that has an implementation of a visual graph of the space, available space on an individual disk. So of course it'll show green when there is a ton of space left, and then the red meaning that there is no space remaining, or barely any space left on the disk. So I believe Trust Manager is if you run a program as an administrator. Let's see if it happens here. I see command prompt. So let's do run as administrator. However, it says unable to log on, user account restriction. But then there we go, we can open that up like so. But it only happens on some apps. I don't think it's going to happen on everything. But this one actually also includes a risk meter, which will specify the risk of whether you'll grant permission or not. Let's go to a random folder on the system, like the local disk. But I can actually see that there is a new description pane here. It actually gives much more information. There's comments section here, which has the date modified, the number of files in the folders, if applicable, and the total folder size. And then we could go here and click show content to the drive. You know, it looks like this is a bug in this build where everything shows as 0 kilobytes. And we have some new buttons in the toolbar. This one is zoom, which of course you can increase the size of the icons. There's a details pane, which again, just like we saw before, it gives you details. And then this is a music toggle. You can group it by album. However, we don't have anything. And then there is a few new options in the context menu. We also have a briefcase. We also have photo album, which is something new here. And you could also create a Windows Media Player playlist directly here. But then appearing by default in the start menu, a new name for device manager, it's called My Hardware, which shows every single piece of hardware on the system. But there also is something new here. It's something called the sidebar. If you go into the start menu properties, and right here, enable the sidebar, and then we'll click OK. And you can see that here is the sidebar. We can click add a tile. So here we go. Here's the clock. Let's add a clock. And let's add a quick launch area. Again, that's where you go for your quick access things. We also have a slideshow, which again will scroll through the pictures on your system. And then there also is the user tile, which I believe shows the current user that's logged on. And then MFU is a programs list of all the programs. And then Desktop Manager, which I think looks to be a very early implementation of the switch between desktops feature that we would see in Windows 10. That's when this feature would be reintroduced. You know, you could have one desktop be, like here, let's say this desktop will be the Windows folder, and then we can open Windows Media Player on this desktop. And then you can see we have 4 desktops, and I believe we're limited to 4. But this is pretty unique that Microsoft was coming up with this idea even back in 2002, which is amazing. This would be later introduced in Task View. So this is what the new Display Properties applet looks like, and it looks pretty identical almost to Vista. However, it doesn't really, function. So I can click on any of these and neither of them function in this build. But of course, you do get the complete functionality by doing the classic panel. And then, of course, here's the standard wallpaper in XP. And I believe the Bliss wallpaper, yep, was replaced with the Milestone 1 picture. Now let's go back to the first desktop that we have. That's okay. So, all right, let's switch it back to the Bliss background we've had. And now if we go to control user passwords 2, I don't think this is right. There we go. If we go to advanced and we require users to press control alt delete, with that option enabled, you can see that we have the codename Longhorn and then it says press control alt delete. So this is pretty nice. We get to have the welcome screen and this control alt delete thing at the same time. In XP, it's only possible if you have the classic login prompt enabled, which again was used in Windows 2000. And then of course it acts like so. We'll press Control Alt Delete and then we can click our user and log in. All right. So we have a game on here. Now let's add a few files. We're going to add a briefcase, but this is actually also a new feature. And in this build, there's actually a redesigned dialog box. So if we go to regedit and then we go to current user software Microsoft and then down to Windows current version Explorer, we will do a new D-word value and we'll call this one new resolve and we'll set that value to 1. And let's actually create a folder here. We'll name this random thing. And we'll create a bitmap, which has nothing. But we can open it with Paint 3. We can open it with Paint, not Paint 3D. I was about to say the wrong program. And we can just draw some. Let's try and do a very crappy implementation of a longhorn. Yeah, that's the best I can do. Yeah, we'll save it. However, it looks like saving it also crashes the program, which I believe is a bug. But it did save, so that's good. Now let's copy the bitmap and then try to rename it. And we should see that new design. Maybe it's only if we're copying a file. So let's move the bitmap to that folder and then rename this one. Oh, maybe I didn't type it right. There we go. And now when we move it, here it is. Here is the new dialog box. So it shows the dates when it was accessed and it has some options on whether you want to keep the source file or destination. And then, of course, resolve, which replaces the file, and then skip this conflict just cancels the process altogether. And now when we remove that key, it's back to the old. So that's pretty neat. But also, I noticed there's a different theme style here. It's called Plex. There's actually two Plexes. This one is the XP style, and this one's the Plex style. So they renamed the default Luna here to Plex, which is interesting. We have an updated version of Internet Explorer here. This is build 6.05. And as you saw earlier, the grace period was reduced to 14 days. However, there was actually a different out of box experience sound here. Well, we couldn't hear it, of course, because there's no audio drivers, but it was actually No Hey Problema. Is that how it's pronounced? Whatever. So that's what the name is. And I believe, well, we would try to play it, but I'm not going to do that. So now, also in this build, there's a prototype of Game Manager, which actually would be introduced in Windows Vista. You can launch a My Game News window by typing MGUI News General. And when we do that, we can just click Continue. And here's what it looks like. It says the following games have fresh publisher content available, which shows absolutely nothing. So now remember about the briefcase. If we run DLL 32, we run that, we get a guide on how to use Windows Briefcase. So this is just a brief dialog box, so that's really all there is here. So that's everything we need to see in this build. We're going to go ahead and move on now to the next build of Longhorn, which is build 3706. And we can see that has not changed either. And this build was compiled on October 29th of 2002. So let's set the date. All right, we'll just click OK. And now we will install this build of Longhorn. And it says, yes, we can upgrade. No, we will not download the updated setup files. And once again, this looks very similar to XP. So now it'll copy the installation files, and look at that, we're already about to restart. So I'll just let it go ahead and reboot on its own. So let's see what will be new in this build. In the next build, and we'll see if it carries everything we've got over. What's actually interesting about this is we can see we have it labeled as XP 64-bit edition version 2003. That's interesting what this identifies it as. So let's go ahead and continue the installation. And I believe everything will once again be identical to XP. Yep, the boot screen is also identical, except we have the 2003 copyright date. Same out of box as before. No, we're not going to activate this pre-release build of Windows. So in this build, the welcome screen has not changed. We still got the clock on the top right, and I can see everything has carried over, including the background. However, there is actually supposed to be a new background in this build, and it's this one. I actually really like this blue design. And it moved everything over. I don't see the taskbar. I don't see the start. Oh, okay, there we go. There's the start menu. Let's see. Let's change the resolution. Let's see what happens. I mean, we can't go to taskbar properties. But there we go. It looks like... What if we do auto hide? There we go. That fixed it. And we can turn that off. There we go. We got the taskbar back. However, enabling the sidebar causes the taskbar to disappear in this build, so I believe this is a bug. So if we turn the sidebar off, there we go. Now we got our taskbar back. So the out-of-box experience Also now includes options for linking the .NET Passport, migrating data from a previous install, in addition to activating the OS. Well, that's if we're installing. We are actually upgrading in this case. There were some WinFS virtual folders implemented here. Now, once again, it looks like the Explorer has not changed. So yeah, it doesn't seem to work here. Now, there is also a new autoplay menu in this build as well. It was actually expanded to include some additional options. However, because it already recognized my game, it looks like it doesn't apply here. Let's see if we can even run it. Though it looks like yes, we can. We can run the game and everything, but I'm not going to go into gameplay of it. There was actually also a new app called My TV app. My games, here it is. Here's the My TV application. And here's the trust manager that we were talking about. So this says, requires your permission to install. Would you like to do that? It even shows the high risk graph, which looks to be glitched. The details pane doesn't look to work. But then when we click it, it opens up the page right here. So this looks to be just a picture, or in other words, a sample. So it's like live TV. So you see here, there's your local channels, and you can see what's on now, what's coming on next. And then you can click watch live TV, and of course, you would need to have a TV tuner card in the system in order for it to work. You can go to other options, and here's the download manager, which is blank. So you can see we now have a darker Plex theme, and it doesn't have separators anymore. Now, if we go back to the registry, and we add the new resolve value again, and set that to 1, we will once again see the updated context menu. However, the date created, modified. So, however, in this implementation, we still have the date accessed because we're coming from a previous build. But the briefcase introduction is still the same thing. We can still show the people title. However, the low and high risk overlaps in the trust manager as we saw. And once again, the Plex theme replaces the Luna theme. However, it still mentions Plex in the place of Luna. And other than that, nothing really much here in this build. So this is the last Milestone 3 build where there are major changes. So now we move on to Milestone 4. This is build 4001 that we're going to be installing next. And this was compiled on December 4th of 2002. And now, when we click Install Longhorn, we're going to see a major overhaul. You can see where we had that classic Luna look. It now says Microsoft Windows, copyright 2002, with the Please Wait label. And everything still comes up in this dialog. And now it brands itself as Longhorn Setup. And this doesn't say, it doesn't have pictures or anything, but still, this is where we put our product key in. Now, the upgrade functionality does not work in this build, but that's okay, because if this all goes well, it should put everything into a Windows.000. Yep, that was their implementation of Windows.old, which is being used now. But either way, it acts the same way. It'll take everything from the previous installation and move it in there. However, we would not be able to restore to it. This is actually one of the first builds that use the new WIM-based setup, which actually stores all the files on a Windows installation in a single WIM file. And when you boot directly off the installation media, you'll now boot into a Windows pre-installation environment. So that way it would easily image the WIM file to the system partition, and then the system would then restart to finish the setup by installing the hardware, then going through the out-of-box experience. Their goal was to do this whole installation process in as little as 15 minutes. However, though, that probably wasn't the case because, depending on how old your system is, well, nowadays, like let's say you're trying to install Windows 8 on a system that was made in like 2006. Let's say that, for example, it would take like about an hour, maybe 2 hours. Or, for example, or another example, when I tried to set up a Windows XP virtual machine on UTM on my iPad, it took 3 hours to set up. But again, the time will vary depending on the kind of hardware you have. So it says, welcome to Windows Setup. We need to ask a few questions before we can start. So we'll click Next. And this again is the license agreement. There's a 5 and the 6 in the place of a button, and these have like background borders around it, but I'm sure that'd be fixed. And now to put the product key in for this build. And that's said about the partition, because I must have went too fast. So what it's doing now is it's copying the files, and oh, it's already done. Alright, so we'll click Finish, and now the system will restart off the disk. So since that's a buggy build, let's try instead build 4002, and we will need to go into the BIOS first in order to set it up. And we need to change the date because this build was compiled on January 8th of 2003. So that means we would be, at this point, losing everything. Now, even though this is build 4002, it looks like it has reverted back to the text-based interface that we had seen earlier. Unknown hard error. Wow. And I'm guessing this is related to the coverage.dll file that says setup cannot format the hard drive because of the incorrect loading protocol, again, of coverage.dll. So that build does not work. So we are going to move on then to build 4008, which was compiled on February 19th of 2003. When we boot off the disk, you see we get a nice new Aurora design. I actually kind of like it too. It looks pretty neat for the time. And then here's the setup process. So we'll click continue and enter the key. This is a 180-day license. And this is the partition we want. And there is a checkbox here that says I want to format the drive using NTFS, and that's what we will do. So now the drive has been configured for NTFS, and now we are copying the files to the disk. And this is pretty much the kind of screen that we'll be seeing for the next several builds. So I'll let you enjoy this new look of a setup. So here's the new out-of-box experience. It says we'll ask you a few questions before getting started. Click Next. And it'll mention here the accounts that we have created, but since this is a new installation, we gotta click Create Account, and it'll show the account name here. So we type our account in the box, and then we click Create Account, and then it'll show it here. And then, of course, we can add additional users as needed, and we click Next when we're done. And it says, thank you for answering the questions instead of just thank you. As setup continues, you can personalize your computer and all that stuff. So, as you can see, the welcome screen is still the same from what we have seen previously. We've still got that clock in the top right corner. And here it is. This is milestone 4 of Longhorn. And we go to the all programs. We can see, of course, a lot of the XP stuff has carried over. And now, if we go into system properties, it now comes up as Microsoft Longhorn XP Professional version 2003 with Windows user as by default in the registration. But I like the green, I guess, tint scheme, whatever it is, on each individual tab. So that's pretty cool. And if we run WinVer, we'll now see Longhorn Professional instead of XP. So that's a change there. But now the Plex theme here in this build looks almost like the Luna theme. And of course, the tray buttons were given the green-like appearance. Buttons are now white instead of blue, like they were before. And see, we're just being spammed with found new hardware wizards. And let's see. We have a most frequent apps tile on the sidebar. So this will show the program list, a list of programs that you've used previously. What else do we have? We have user tile, slideshow, tray icons. Again, it shows some of the legacy notifications. And then we also have the quick launch area, the clock, and then the search bar. And you can see there, this is the new notification that you see. So instead of a pop-up balloon, you can see at the top there, that's a timer for how long it'll be before the notification disappears. I believe that's if you hover your mouse over it, it would stop. Yeah, the timer stops when you hover the mouse over it. And then once the timer is up, then the notification automatically disappears. However, that's not the case now in Windows 10 and 11. By default, you'll only see the notification on the bottom right or wherever the taskbar is for about 5 seconds before the notification goes into the Action Center, where you then cleared from there. The new options menu here, again, this is like the options that we have seen. There's the minimize bar, and then we can click this icon to restore it. So we have a new task view pane on the left, and we can see that we can now filter by individual character ranges. So there's 0 through 9, A to H, I to P, Q to Z, and whatnot. And we also see we have new names for my documents, my music, my pictures. It's now called Document Library, although it still shows my documents. Music Library, and then the Picture and Video Library. And you can see we have new graphics too. We can open up the C drive. You can see we got like the Longhorn clock. And there's the big option that says show the contents of the drive. And we can open up the System32 folder. And this is actually the first build that implements the parental controls feature, which would actually be introduced into the final release of Vista. And this would actually be used on a few other platforms as well, such as, I believe, iOS has their screen time functionality, and the Nintendo Switch and Wii U, I believe, also have similar functionality like this as well. So what would happen is you could, if you had like a child using the computer, you could set like a limit on what hours they can use the machine. So I really would like to try it out. So, well, we don't have anything, so we can create a new limited account, and I'll just call it parent test so we can test it out. So here we go. We'll set this, and we will set times that I specify. So it's currently 1:08. We can see only allowed times. We'll set it to all blocked. So now let's see what happens. We'll go to switch user, and I don't remember putting a password in. Yeah, I don't remember putting a password. It never asked me for a password. But I believe it puts a password in there that you don't even know. So now let's see what happens if we set it to can be used at any time. Then we go to switch user, and now we can log in. So what the parental controls does is when the time is blocked, I believe you would have to put in an administrator password in order to log in. So we'll go ahead and log off of this account, and we will log back into our administrator. So the administrator on the machine can monitor the use of internet programs on the machine. And we'll go back here to the admin account we were just on. So that's what that is. I'm not sure if that's the way it would behave in the final release of Vista. But then once the time passes, the user is automatically logs out, and then any attempts logging back in results in a message that tells the user that the account time restrictions have passed and that they can no longer log in until the restriction time is up. So that's pretty cool. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and remove this account because this was just a test sample. And now if we go to properties here, we can once again see we have the Plex. We still have the XP look, and then we still have we have a classic Windows 2000 monitor. But then of course, once again, this wallpaper replaces Bliss. And if we look at the screensaver here, I forgot to show you this earlier, we actually have a different picture. So now instead of saying XP Professional, it now says Microsoft Longhorn Professional. And just like the standard XP lock screen or screensaver, it does the exact same thing. It'll just move around in random directions on the screen like it was. So that's pretty neat. Windows Media Player also got an update here. This is Media Player version 9. And then there are also some hidden things. But then I also forgot to show the WinVer banner. The copyright date was 2006, but it was actually a typo. And there's the license agreement. So we're going to move on to the first Milestone 5 build of Longhorn. This is build number 4015, which was compiled on March 28th of 2003. Now, before we start the setup, I do want to do a few things, but I don't want to change the resolution. I want to bring the folders back that we had earlier. So then we're going to make we're going to put a briefcase on the desktop. We're going to do a bitmap image, and then we will go to paint. Let's just draw a whole bunch of red. Yeah, I like that. So let's save it. So we'll save that bitmap image. Let's also put a WordPad document. And I'll just write that text document. What else can we add? Let's add a media playlist. No songs, so this is supposed to be the new playlist menu. We can drag and drop songs here onto the list. And then well, it doesn't look like it works in this build, but oh well. Alright, so I've already set the date to when this next build was compiled. So we'll go ahead and we will click install Longhorn. And once again, the Aurora background from here looks pretty much the same. We need to set the date to when the next build was compiled that we're going to do. We're going to do build 4020, and it was compiled on May 7th of 2003. Let's go ahead and begin the setup. Here we go. It says welcome to Longhorn setup. Now we'll put in our key. And once again, it's a 180-day evaluation. And we get the option to do the express upgrade. Yep, we would like to do just that. So the setup is pretty much going to be the same, except for when the install is finished. And you're going to see those changes in just a matter of moments here. My goodness, the migration data went so fast. And it looks so as the setup files. So while we let that go, since we're skipping over a few builds, what was different about them? Let's look at 4011 first, which was compiled on March 5th of 2003. Now this is actually where a new boot screen was introduced, and that's the build that we are going... Now it's this build is where we see a new boot screen, and that is what we are going to be seeing in just a bit. And it also introduces a new notification menu, some changes in icons and 3D view, and it also fixes the copyright date. It says phase 1 of setup has completed. Your computer will restart in a moment to begin phase 2. You can walk away now, come back in about 10 minutes, or stay and watch setup. Well, that's what we're all here to do. We're here to stay and watch the setup go. So, anyway. Then build 4015 was compiled on March 28th of 2003. And this is where a new wallpaper is introduced. And once again, we have Windows Longhorn Setup and Longhorn, which is the old build. And a lot of these builds it couldn't really install because 4011 has a broken out-of-box experience and 4015 has a broken hard drive controller. And you can see there's the new boot screen we were just talking about. It just says Microsoft Longhorn instead of Windows XP Professional, and it just strips it of basically all of its original components, like the copyright date on the bottom left and the Microsoft logo on the bottom right. And here is the plug-and-play hardware detection screen. This is a new feature that was introduced in Milestone 5. So this detects hardware on the system, and it says it may take up to 10 minutes. And as soon as that completes, then there actually is no out-of-box experience here. It has been removed entirely, and it will actually automatically log in with an administrator account. This is if we had done it, through the disk. If we booted off the CD and did the whole install. In this case, we did an upgrade, so it should log us in with the account that we've already used. But some other changes that occurred in these other builds that we did not get to check out. There is also a new basket sidebar tile in which we will take a look at. And great, we're greeted with a message that says your password is expired. So yeah, here's what the classic logon prompt looks like. We'll just go ahead and click OK. And here's what the new welcome screen looks like. It's a pretty neat design. It has like a large box with the information. I saw the Windows logo up on top. So that's one of the major changes in this build. And you can see it says Windows storage engine has crashed, but interestingly it mentions a date and time as to when it crashed. So I think that's a new feature. And I just saw a new notification feature as well. So there's a new clock design down here at the bottom. And it looks to be hard-coded into the sidebar. We can lower down the sidebar so we can't open the date and time settings from here. Or clicking the start button again in some cases doesn't really close the menu all the way, it just opens it again. So, interesting. Anyway, let's see what else we've got. But of course, nothing really too much. So the wallpaper for that login screen is the same that was used in milestone 3. But that login background is actually customizable. And I can show you. If we open regedit and go to HKey users, default, control panel, desktop, and we find the wallpaper string right here. By default, it's none. So we look at it here. You can change the value to a JPEG image. So like I have an image of the skyline I could take as an example. So I can see instead of the graph, it now shows the amount of free space that is left. We also have the Windows flag on the in the disk icon, and it also shows the percent of space that is full on the drive. So now when we open up the disk, I'm going to open up my flash drive, which contains the the file, and I also added a few other custom pictures to it as well. So here we go. Here is the untitled picture. We're going to copy that off the USB, C, and then untitled. So then we click OK. Now let's see what happens. There we go. So I just needed to put in the path. And now, instead of that wallpaper, you now see a nice, beautiful picture of the Chicago skyline with the nice purple tint that I put down from that I put in from Clipchamp. Yeah, I used Clipchamp to create that purple tint. Let's actually set that as the background too. So we'll need to go back to the C drive. And then if I go over to the picture, and then I'll set that as the background. And I actually just noticed something too. A lot of our other stuff is gone. Do we have our .old folder? It looks like no, we don't. It looks like we lost it all. But this is actually good, so we can set it as the background. Ooh, I like that. What the heck are we opening? Oh, it must be opening a screensaver thing, but we can go to my current theme, and let's change it to stretch, because I like it stretched. And hit apply. There we go. Very nice. And then here's the same screensaver from before. It still says Longhorn Professional. You can see it still says Longhorn Professional. Not really an artist, but the best I could do. And then here are the spires. And then we will save the bitmap image. Let's also put a briefcase on the desktop. We're going to put a WordPad document. And just name it so we'll call it that. And then we'll put a WAV file on the desktop too. And then we'll do a zip folder. And I'll bring the sidebar back. If we go to WinVer, we will now see that all labels of Longhorn XP Professional have been removed. And you can see down here it now says just Longhorn Professional. It doesn't mention XP anymore. Now in the sidebar there is a basket. There's a lot of new options here. If we go to basket, there we go. So you can store files in which you want to perform tasks. So we can click here and it shows the items that are in the basket. Like here, I'll take this bitmap image for an example. And I'm not sure if it works. Oh, it does work. So there's our bitmap file. And of course we can click preview And it should open, but I don't think. Yeah, I don't think the photo viewer works in this build. I'm not sure if it is. But then we also have the changes here. See, the documents folder has been reverted back to my documents, along with all the other stuff too, my music and my pictures. We also have a separate thing. It still says picture and video library, which again has nothing in it. And then this is where you access your recent documents. There's also a My Contacts menu. I believe this is new. This is where you have your contact information. Well, not your, but for, family members and whatnot. And then this is where you go to My Music. You can see this is a new look. It looks pretty neat. The parental controls icon has received an update. And there is also a new option here where you can limit the games and there is also a new setting where you can limit the rating of games that they could play. So like for example here, so let's say E as an example, it's like a more appropriate game for their age, let's say. So they'd be suitable for games that are rated E for everyone. And then, of course, when they get older, then they'd be rated up to teens. They could play up to that. And then, of course, this is where we get to some of the more mature stuff. So this is 17 M for mature. But then this is a rating I don't think I've ever seen. Adults only. I'm not sure if this rating was ever used or it was dropped. And this is also a secondary checkbox where you can allow the user to play games that have not yet been rated by the ESRB. So we can set restrictions like so. So let's say they can only play games that are rated E for everyone. And in fact, I'll actually test this out with that game that we tried to do earlier. And I believe there are also similar controls in, I believe, the Nintendo Switch as well. Okay, so I clicked install and now nothing's happening. Here, let's try going into the CD itself and running the installer. And let's see what we get. Maybe we'll need to explore the disk. And let's just click install. And clicking that results in absolutely nothing. Okay. That game's not going to work. Okay, well, if that isn't going to go well, then I have another game we can try. It's a bit older than this one, and it's actually another game that I used to play when I was a kid. So, okay, it looks like this one works. Or we're just going to do the Express. No. Sure. This is a Longhorn build, so it doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter what happens, but... Alright. So now, it should be installed on all accounts. So let's find out. So we're gonna go ahead and clear the new programs thing, and then we're going to log into the other account. Oh yes, I really like the background, and it should log in. Now I want to see what the restriction looks like on here when we get there, but it doesn't look like the sidebar or taskbar show up. Maybe that's a bug. Did it install the game for all users? Looks like it did, but let's see if we can run. So it looks like the game was rated E, so it looks like, yes, it does function. Now, let's see what happens if we try to, let's say, change it so that way it can only play like rated M and everything. And maybe I will need to press Control Delete. So pressing that, of course, pulls up the task manager where we can then go and end the game. So let's go back to the administrator account and let's see what happens. We're going to go back to the parental controls. So limit the games they can play. So right now it's rated E. Let's set it to T. And then we'll set game restrictions. And now, when we go back to the other account we were just at, and then try to launch the game again, it does actually still work. So I'm not sure if it applies to CD-ROM games like this, but I do not think so. So in that case, let's go ahead and log off before the game continues any further. So let's log off of the account, and we can see that now, since our access has been restricted, we are now put with a password, and it says unknown username or bad password. It doesn't mention about the parenting restrictions. I'm not sure if it's a bug where it doesn't give like the exact reason or something. But what I've interestingly noticed is that the arrow is now the Windows flag. So we are now going to move on to the next build, which is build 4029. And I will need to go to the date, time, and language options to access the classic menu. This build was compiled on June 19th of 2003. So we'll go ahead and we'll click install. And you can see instead of saying please wait, it says starting setup, 1 moment please. And instead of the Windows flag at the top, it's been removed and has these toggles here at the top. Then we'll click continue. And then again, this is where we put a product key. Yes, I accept the agreement. And here we go again. We get the Express upgrade. Plus we have the more setup options menu. Again, it's the same area as before. But we are going to do the Express upgrade. And we're going to upgrade to this build. So let's see if everything carries over to this one. So I thought the hardware phase of the setup was not going to work, and apparently it did. So resetting the machine after being stuck on starting setup for about 10 minutes worked. The background we had set up in the previous build carried over. And I can also see that the Control-Alt-Delete requirement is now enabled by default. So we'll press Control-Delete. You can see the Windows flag now moves down over here. And there's our test account from earlier. And as you can see, my main account apparently is a password. However, it says I have a restriction. I never put a restriction on my password. Possible reason: blank passwords are not allowed. I think we're actually required to have a password now. So let's see if we can use the other users menu to log in. Yeah, so it looks like I might have screwed up the parental controls on this specific build. So I'm guessing once again we're going to have to reformat the hard drive and start over. So this time we're going to move on to build 4031, which is the last milestone 5 build of Longhorn, and it was compiled on July 3rd, 2003. So there's the familiar looking Aurora. It says starting setup. So welcome to Windows Setup, click continue. Now we need to put in the key. So 180-day evaluation. We are going to go ahead and we are not going to format the drive because we want to keep everything as it is. And here you can actually type in a computer name. So apparently this is a new feature here. And we will call it Longhorn. I'll call it Longhorn Update because we're upgrading between builds. So apparently that's a new addition to the out-of-box experience. So now here we go again. It is copying the files. Now, this is going to be an add-on to 4029, which we were going to take a look at. Now, in that build, as you saw, there was a new login screen, and we will be seeing that again. And apparently this build and the next several builds actually use the Pig Latin string for the Longhorn Professional, Longhorn Home Edition. Because yes, there was a Home Edition of Longhorn as well, but we're mainly focusing on the professional version. And there is also some updates to the Plex theme. And there's also supposed to be a new security interface, which would behave almost identically to the final release of Vista. There are also some updates to explore, including a carousel and panorama view. So we will see all the new features when this is done. Should now have a fully functional Longhorn build. And there we go. We can see it says this is Longhorn Milestone 5. And apparently it says the system has recovered from a serious error. The image file was bug checked with the kernel mode exception not handled error, which was caused by ataport.sys, and the crash was not cleared before the build was imaged. So that's why we're getting this. There's the storage engine crash message, and it actually came up twice in the spam of found new hardware messages. And it looks like our Jumpstart Kindergarten game actually carried over. Nice. So that carried over. However, all of our stuff did not carry over. The notification menu remains the same. As you can see, we have a new clock on the right-hand side. I know that time is not correct, but that is no big deal. There actually were also Labo 6 builds of the last three that we took a look at. The Labo 6 build of 4029 was compiled on June 29th, and instead features a M6 background. However, looks pretty much identical to this build here. 4030 is basically the same thing, and so is the Labo 6 build of 4031. The Labo 6 build of 4032 is also Milestone 6, and again features the games library among other things. So let's do the thing again where we changed the log on screen background, but I'm not sure if it's going to work in this build. You can see here's the new games library that was introduced in this build. And I see we have some new stuff in the sidebar too. The basket actually now correctly works in this build, so we'll add a basket. And I'll minimize the bar for now. We can see here's some tasks in the games library, but it doesn't look like there's anything there. Over the current user. Oh, here we go, desktop. And then we go down to wallpaper. I could see it reset the value, so I would need to change it again to C untitled.jpg. Okay, and then we'll click OK. And I'll just throw this in the bin and set this as the background. And we can see some more elements are coming together. See, we have that XP monitor design back. And do we get anything different about this menu? No, we do not. And when we click switch user, there we go. Now we have our login screen background restored. And clicking switch user, Really brings up, yep, the control delete because the admin account is now the main account on the system. So let's show the carousel view. We will find it in the hardware and devices applet. You can see this is a pretty interesting looking view. So just clicking on each individual icon will bring it around. So it's usually only visible in this menu. When you look at WinVer, you can see, again, nothing has changed here. But I also see that the text is back to being on the left side like it was previously. I mean, the center title text, that was something I had noticed when we started this. And that actually was introduced in Windows 3.1 and then would be later reintroduced in Windows 8. So really, Microsoft had already been envisioning the future. Let's go into the control panel and look at the parental controls. Because now it looks like we have some new options. So we have an ability that says parent. So we have a new feature in parental controls. It's called parental auditing. So what this is you could monitor what the user does on the machine, and I believe it'll log it. And you can actually view audit reports from here. But if we go into the properties here, these look messed up. Microsoft May, Onghorn Lay, Professional Pay, Urgent Vay 2003. And I like the build string, Onghorn Lay, Professional Pay. That is really interesting. That is just really interesting. But anyway, let's see. We got some new graphics here on Explorer. So we're about ready now to move on to the next build. So looking at the notes for 4033, which is the first Milestone 6 build, this one was compiled on July 17th of 2003, and looking at the notes, there really isn't anything too significant. However, looking at the build after that, build 4038, which was compiled on August 13th of 2003, that was the first build of Longhorn to have the entire WIM image containing the setup instead of being in a separate boot folder. However, it is not possible to upgrade to this build because if we do that, it'll load up, it'll corrupt system, and which is a critical file or directory that the system will be able. It is not possible to upgrade to build 4048 because the registry will corrupt, in which the system will not be able to boot. And even if it did, it'll cause LSASS to throw an error and the system will not boot. But other than that, there really is not too many changes, as with the LSASS error, it'll throw up the following message. When trying to update a password, this return status indicates that the value provided as the current password is not correct. So that is what we will not try. 4039 is another Labo 6 build, and it looks like there are some significant changes in this one. Build 4039, this is a Labo 6 build, which was compiled on August 24th of 2003. I'm not going to do anything with this yet because we probably will not be able to upgrade to this build directly. But we can see we have a whole new graphical design. You can see down here it looks almost identical to the final release and what would be used in future versions. It says collecting information and installing Windows. I like this one, Final Countdown. That's pretty cool. So this is a 180-day license, and ooh, it actually looks like it will let us upgrade to Labo 6. Okay. All right, so it looks like we actually will be able to proceed with upgrading to Labo 6. So, other than what we're about to see here, nothing pretty much is going to be too different, except the setup will once again read Windows pre-installation environment instead of XP. But this image of a clock, it's not moving or anything, but it's kind of interesting that they put it there. So there are going to be a few changes in this build, so let's wait for it to finish, and then we will take a look. And I actually just noticed it's just saying shutting down instead of Windows is shutting down, like we saw in XP. So once again, we have the three entries of Longhorn instead of just one, and there's that pre-installation environment message that would be changed in this build. And because I already set the date to when this build was compiled, let's just go ahead and boot off the disk. So we're in business now. So as we can see, we have an all new design. And now we actually have an estimated time remaining clock. And we'll click continue. And now it's ready for the key. So 180-day evaluation. And it says clean install. So computer name, we'll call this Longhorn upgrade. And then clicking back, oh, we have to click save. We're going to install it to this drive. Yep, move everything there. And then I gotta click continue and then click continue again. And now, ooh, I like that. I like the how when the next number comes up, it just flashes for like it just only flashes initially. So that's interesting. Okay, so we are gonna go ahead and let this build install, and I'll let you all watch the setup of it, and then we will be back when it is done. Okay, here we are on build 4053, and of course I did not expect anything to carry over at all, but what we do see here is actually a new visual design. In this build there wasn't really too much that had changed from the previous builds, but we do have a link to file a bug in Longhorn, which just opens up this page here, which doesn't work. Build 4051 was compiled on October 1st of 2003, so this was just a few days before. So build 4050 introduced that new slate theme. This is called slate. So we can see we have the plain start button, just the Windows flag. And this would be in the final release of Vista. The other build, 4050, would crash upon completion. 4048 was compiled on September 25th. However, when we press the Control-Alt-Delete, we will now get security options. However, it is no longer possible to change the logon screen background, and it is now permanently this slate black color. The flag now moves up rather than down, and now when we open WinVer, we will see that it's now this black color here to fit better with the theme. And now it reads Windows codename Longhorn instead of just Longhorn. And the screensaver, if we go into the screensaver properties, this is what it looks like now. The same as the boot screen almost. And in the turn off computer, this actually also gets the new slate look as well, but the buttons remain unchanged. And here's the interesting thing about this one is on the left here you get the clock and then you have a calendar with some pictures on it. Which is pretty cool, I gotta say, but sadly something like this never made it into a final release of Windows. So once again we'll have to go into the date and time settings to change it to when this build was compiled, which was on April 25th of 2004. So there we go. So that was actually a Sunday. And let's see if it found the disk. Yes, it did. But first, let's take a look at, you can see here, nothing here has changed. And here's the redesigned screen that says, welcome, what do you want to do? We want to install Longhorn. So we get the starting setup, one moment please again. Here's the same thing. And now we put in the key. So here's the 180-day evaluation. And yes, it says upgrades to this build have been disabled. So we cannot upgrade to build 4074 directly, but I can go ahead and explain exactly what has changed in this build. So there's a new leaves wallpaper, and I'm sure that's going to be the background we will be seeing a little later on. There is also an early variant of Flip 3D in this build. There are also arrow stars, which will show stars bouncing around the screen. A overhaul to the preview pane and banners for libraries, and there is also an animated preview pane as well. However, there are some modifications that are required. There is also an exclusive boot screen for LDDM graphics drivers. However, none were ever known or made available, so unfortunately we will not be able to see that boot screen. There are also two new help programs, helppane.exe, which shows on the right hand side of the screen, very similarly to how it does with the final release of Vista, but mainly it pulls up the safe mode guide when you boot into safe mode. And then the earlier version was HLPLGVWR.exe. There are also some new dialog boxes, and we'll be seeing those a little later here. So we unfortunately cannot proceed with this build. And the Play a Game with Friends was actually renamed to Buddy Matchmaker. But as you can see here, here's the new games menu. You can see here's all the internet games, which sadly do not work. We can click it, but nothing happens. But we can still launch our good old 3D pinball on Longhorn, which is exciting. However, no sound though, which is such a shame. So I don't think 4074 is going to bring too many changes and adjustments. We could try and click play, but I don't really think anything much is going to happen. So let's move on then to build 4081. And this is the first Milestone 8 build, which was compiled on May 3rd of 2004. So let me set it to that. So May 3rd. All right. As you can see here, we also have a redesigned autoplay menu. So almost similarly to the final release of Vista, except it's larger. And again, it shows what do you want to do with it. You can ask to prompt each time, you can tell it to do nothing, or you can open the folder to view files. But we do want to open the setup utility. So here it is. It says welcome to Microsoft. Does that say Microsoft Windows or Longhorn? And this is also a non-componentized installation. So unfortunately this one we cannot do. I got a few more other builds we can try, but if we were to try an upgrade, we would run into the 0x7E error. A registry tweak to report it as a componentized build, an error during the copy file phase. So those could be the possible reasons. So we would not be able to upgrade to that build regardless. But then there's also a Labo 7 variant of 4085. I have the main variant of 4086. And once again, we will not be able to upgrade to that, no matter how hard we try. Same with 4087. So then I guess that leaves us with Labo 2 of 4088. So upgrade bugs. So it looks like this one we will not be able to upgrade to because it'll say that a bug check will occur again, the same errors as before. So 4093, I believe this is it. So with all of that process of elimination, this is it. We have reached the final build before the development reset. This is build 4093, and we are going to upgrade to it regardless. This one was compiled on August 19th of 2004, just hours before they reset development. And you can see there was some different text. There was actually some more text. It said the process may take an hour to finish. Do not shut down your computer. So that was another change that happened in this build. 180-day license, and again, this is a non-componentized and componentized block. But I believe now it says you cannot upgrade, but it doesn't matter because we don't really have too much on this install. So let's just go ahead and proceed with it. Longhorn upgrade, and we'll click continue. We're going to install Windows on this partition. So again, that's the reminder that it will save everything as Windows.00 or that old version of Windows.old. But regardless, it's the same thing. So when this build was compiled, Microsoft had determined that there were too many features being implemented into Longhorn that they wanted to save a whole lot for Blackcomb or Windows 7. So what they did was they reset development following the following the compile of this build. So after that, they reset development. But let's go ahead and explain the other builds that we did not take a look at. 4088, it no longer shows a boot screen upon the pre-installation and setup. Remember, this one was compiled on... So in 4088, which was compiled on July 6th, 2004, there is no boot screen upon initializing the pre-installation environment in the setup. However, it would later be reused in one of the post-reset builds that we will take a look at next. WordPad was broken between builds 4081 and 4087. However, that has since been fixed. There were also some compatibility errors that were also addressed. And now it says, thanks, that's all the information we need. Feel free to do something else. Just come back in about 15 minutes, not 10 minutes like before. However, if you install this build, many drivers are not really going to be installed by default, but then there are various commands that won't work, such as, the format command because a specific DLL is missing. And then if you try to copy the files over from the CD to a formatted hard drive with Windows PE, it'll crash with the FAT file system error. But what we're going to be seeing here is a incomplete rewritten .NET managed product activation component. Safe mode is broken in that build, and it was because the safe boot key is largely incomplete, but then restoring that key would fix safe mode. So here we go. After a reboot, we now finally have our desktop and sidebar. And right away we can see the updated notification setting. Once again there, that orange bar, that's the timer. That's how long it'll be before the notification disappears. So that fits in really well with the theme. And once again, the calendar and clock remain unchanged. I see we also have a new recycle bin icon. Going into settings, yep, it is 16-bit by default. We can set it to 32. And interesting, it's saying that we're running low on space on the disk that we just used to install this build. But anyway, we have a new recycle bin icon. And do we have new icons everywhere else? It looks like yes, we do. So we do have some new icons. And then we have basically, yeah, so basically some new icons, but of course everything else remains the same. There are also some other builds here, but because we're still XP, there's also a Jade theme on here. Looks pretty nice. But then, of course, we have the XP stuff still. We still have the Luna look and everything. And it looks like a lot of the wallpapers have been removed. Exclaim. That's for the active desktop. Apparently, there's a picture of the Kodak logo. And there was some leaf as the desktop background, but apparently that doesn't apply here. There's also an updated user account control Windows security dialog box, which we will not be able to show. But there actually also in this build is there is also an updated Windows media player. It's supposed to serve as a replacement. So if we go to see Windows, we will find the program here. It's called MX Player. So this is the Windows Media Player that was supposed to replace the one that was preloaded with Windows. And in addition to that, there is also a new Movie Maker program. If we open up program files and Movie Maker version 3 and we run the app, well not app, we got to run moviemaker.exe. However, it is largely incomplete. So we can just go ahead and hit retry. Let's see. Let's run the deployment manifest first. But yeah, here's the security icon, the new security options. And again, can't validate the signatures, but again, that's because it's largely incomplete. So let's abort it there. There's also a few new overhaul displayed properties dialog box. Well, that also makes a return in this build. However, it's now based on the Avalon. And I see this is new. We hold down, if we go here on the left arrow, we can see the previous folder we were in. So there are also a couple of files that are supposed to be labeled LHDex, Power CPL, and WP Wizard. But then there are also some new control panel stuff, I believe. So yeah, you can see the control panel remains the same. The parental controls, I see it's back down to just limit the games they can play. And everything else so far remains the same, except appearance and themes. We click display, that's the new settings thing, but then there are also some new options as well. But then there are also some overhauls to the activation with two editions, Windows Longhorn Home Edition and Windows Longhorn Premium Edition. This is supposed to be a prototype of the activation, when you activate Windows. And then there's also an early variant of Migration Wizard here. So of course it performs just like it's just like how it works. So you just transfer the files over from your old computer to your new machine. And there actually also is new options here. And this is supposed to be a prototype of what we would see in Vista. So you can see we have the shutdown button here. And then there is the slider over here with options to sleep, restart, and shut down the machine. And then I believe there is also a shutdown timer. So let's see if it comes up here. Yep. So you can see here's the revamped timer. So it gives a 10-second countdown. So it gives the user 10 seconds to decide to change their mind before the system shuts down on its own. So otherwise, that's really everything here. So that's it. That is the pre-reset builds of Windows Longhorn. So in the next episode, we're going to move on to the post-reset, the builds that have happened after the development reset. But first, we're going to see if we can upgrade from pre-reset to post-reset. So, until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.